Good afternoon, members. A very warm welcome to our scrutiny today, natural infrastructure and growth scrutiny. I'm going to go through the usual opening remarks, so please bear with me. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There are no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm does sound, please follow the crowd out to the evacuation point near the cafe. Can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it's switched off when you've finished addressing or not addressing the meeting, and mobiles are turned to silent. This meeting will of course be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Washbite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. Excellent. Apologies please, Hannah.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Holloway's provided apologies, and we've got Councillor Ney attending as a substitute.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks. Welcome, Councillor Ney. The agenda is rather narrow today. We've got a very exciting agenda, but I don't deem it necessary then need to have a vice chair. Is one required under the Constitution? Great. I'll crack on as we are then. Thank you. Declarations of interest. In respect to the agenda items, I've seen Councillor Rainsford first and then Councillor McCarthy.
I am the owner of one water share in Pennon.
Yeah, it is a DPI, but it is a matter of public record. It's on your declaration, so you should be able to continue in one share. I don't think it's too significant. Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Hi, declare Ocean OS, which is a data aggregation company, and some of their projects look at water quality across the UK.
So is that a personal or a pecuniary?
Personal.
Thank you. Councillor Bannerman.
Similar to Councillor Rainsford, my partner has one share with Water Share Plus. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So that's a pecuniary. Well, it's a personal interest because you don't benefit personally, do you? I don't think it's precluding you from taking part. Thank you. Great. Any more for any more? Super, thank you. That takes us up to agenda item 3. The minutes have been circulated in advance of the meeting, as is the usual convention. Any observations, remarks, amendments? Great, I'll sign those as an accurate record. And that brings me to item 4, Chair's urgent business. I haven't been appraised of any, so I'm going to pause there at this point. We are awaiting the arrival of South West Water. They've been held up in traffic. Should be here in 5 minutes or so. So what I'm proposing to do is just adjourn the meeting for those 5 minutes, and then as soon as they arrive, we'll switch back on and continue with the meeting. All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to Growth and Natural Infrastructure and Growth Scrutiny panel. I'll deal with introductions in just a moment. Before your arrival, we've managed to get through some aspects of our agenda, the administrative aspects. So we'll be going straight into your agenda item in due course. But I should, out of courtesy, give you a heads up that this meeting is broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Warspite room and this scrutiny meeting, you are consenting to that. Is that clear? Thank you very much. I think it'd be very useful if you were perhaps to introduce yourself for the benefit of the millions watching online and those in the room of who we are and what you do. So perhaps very quickly, Mark, if I can begin with you. Thank you. The mics, it's just to hit the red button for on, and when you're finished, just turn it off, please.
Hi there. So my name's Mark Worsfold and I'm Director of Asset Management at South West Water.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Alan Burrows. I'm Head of Local Government Affairs at Pennon.
Thank you. My name's Ian Lake. There is a different job title. My job title now is actually Head of Developer Services. So I'm responsible for all the development growth across the region.
And just for the avoidance of confusion, Pennon Group obviously is the parent company of South West Water. Thank you. Well, all the councillors here present have place name cards in front of them. Phil, did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we met Philip Robinson, Service Director of Street Services. Good afternoon.
Before councillors perhaps raise some questions, I understand you have a presentation, is that right? No presentation. Did you want to do a brief introduction, a verbal introduction? Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it would be helpful for me just to talk about our business plan, which is coming up over the next 5 years. So on the 1st of April, yesterday, we will be starting on our new business plan, which is called Asset Management Plan 8 for the period 2025 to 2030. And the 4 pillars within that plan consist of storm overflows and pollutions, what we're doing to reduce those over that 5-year period. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is around water quality and resilience. So that centres around drinking water quality and resilience to our network, particularly ensuring that we've got enough water to provide to the increasing population, but also to manage the impacts of climate change as well. The third pillar is on biodiversity gain and carbon net zero. And I think that says what it says on the tin, which is to move towards carbon net zero and to improve biodiversity in the operations that we undertake. And the third one is around affordability, where we set aside in this year's, in the business plan for the next 5 years, a significant fund for those who are finding it difficult to afford their water bills, which is a sum of £200 million. So hopefully, Chair, that sets the scene for our next 5 years. I'm sure the majority of the conversations will centre around a couple of those topics.
Thanks, Alan. Well, the purpose of today's meeting... Yes, Councillor Ricketts.
Just a quick one, Chair. I'm confused. Why is there no written report? Why is it verbal? That's very unusual. How did that happen?
Councillor Ricketts, South West Water were invited to attend today, and they have done so. We invited South West Water on the basis that they could have an understanding of Plymouth City Council's plans, and more importantly, we could understand how aligned South West Water are to our plans, our aspirations, of the council's aspirations, and councillors will be given the opportunity to ask South West Water in person as to the infrastructure, whether it's fit for purpose now, and whether it aligns with the city's very ambitious plans. I'm grateful that South West Water are here. Whether they've come with a report or whether it's PowerPoint slides, in my view, is by the by. I'm grateful that we have 3 members from South West Water here to answer questions from councillors. So I'm happy to continue on that basis.
I'm happy we've got a presentation, a PowerPoint. That's great.
No, we don't. There's no PowerPoint, no presentation. You've just had a verbal update of the 5-year plan. But you can put questions to the South West Water members, all right? Thank you very much for attending. So we had a very brief meeting when we extended the invitation to you, and just for the benefit of everybody present and those watching online, the rationale to inviting you in today, and I'm very grateful for your attendance, was so you could understand Plymouth City Council's aspirations in terms of our growth in the city, and understand too what we as Plymouth City councillors might feel are the pinch points and the concerns in terms of infrastructure, and identify together or raise with you any concerns we might have in terms of where South West Water and Plymouth City Council are aligned in terms of achieving those ambitions, and ensuring that your service is keeping pace with our very ambitious plans. So that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to explore for the next hour and a half or so. All right, thank you. First on my list, as always, is Councillor Rainsford. Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually interested in issues around storm overflows, and I'm pleased to say that's a pillar of your 5-year plan. Are there other areas in Plymouth other than the city centre which you have already identified as requiring urgent investment in order to improve the storage of runoff water during heavy rain? And importantly, how are you going to monitor the level of improvement, hopefully, that is achieved or not, following on from those improvements? You'll be aware we've already got some big new suds in the city centre as part of the work that's been going on there.
So I'll start with the first part of the question. So you're absolutely right. One of our pillars is reducing pollutions and storm overflows. And as a result of the request from the Secretary of State for the Environment, approximately 3 years ago, all water companies were asked to submit a plan to reduce the operation of storm overflows by 2050, was the original ask. There were a number of caveats to that, and there were a number of priorities that the government set for us to achieve that. Subsequently, we submitted our plan to the Secretary of State, which was accepted by the Secretary of State. And the first thing I will say is that our plan is going to deliver a reduction in the operation of storm overflows by 2040, not 2050, which was the original requirement from the Secretary of State. So that's the first thing. The second thing within that is we have had to prioritise where we're going to make those investments over the next 15 years. And in this first 5-year period, we will be focusing on those storm overflows that operate near or next to bathing waters and or shellfish waters, because feedback from our customers and stakeholders have said that's where they want us to prioritise our actions. So, for example, in Plymouth and around the Sound, there will be a number of bathing waters. Where there are storm overflows that impact those bathing waters, they will be addressed as a priority. The majority of those will be addressed within the first 5 years, with some leading into the second 5 years. And that's because we have to smooth and make sure any increase that we have to make on customer bills isn't sharp over the first period. We do have to manage the customer bills as well, and Ofwat have a role to play in regulating how much we can increase our bills by. So in summary, we have a plan. We're delivering 10 years ahead of the government target of 2040, and our priority will be on those storm overflows that operate in or near a bathing water or shellfish water. I'm going to pause there. Mark, is there anything I've missed?
Yeah, as Alan said, our focus is around storm overflows. There are 1,379 storm overflows in the southwest, and not surprisingly, we can't solve all of them overnight and resolve that, and that's why it's a 15-year programme to deliver. Around 450, 500 of those already meet the new standards that government has set. And so our focus is very much about those that don't meet those standards and how we improve those. We recognise for the southwest the economic value associated with those bathing waters, and as a result we've prioritised all of the first 5 years about bathing waters and shellfish waters to make sure that we are delivering against those and achieving all of those by 2030. As you probably aware, a number of inland bathing waters were designated about a year or so ago, particularly around Dartmouth and the Dart. We had to reprioritise the programme midway through and be quite agile to make sure that we were picking up those inland waters as well. So our focus is 2030 bathing waters, shellfish waters, with then subsequent phases coming through in the following 5-year periods up to 2040. But the primary piece for us is that we're going to be doing that ahead of the government targets. And we're the only water company to do that by 2040 in our plans. So that sounds quite significant. It is actually a very significant sum of money. So our final determination from Ofwat set out £764 million that we've got to look and target and invest on storm overflows over the next 5 years. And then there's going to be a similar sum in each of the following 5-year periods as well. So it's a very significant amount of investment, and it will see significant improvements.
Just one other thing. If I
Sorry,
may.
can I just pause you there, Alan? Mark,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm
Sorry.
going to bring Phil in a moment. Mark, sorry, there were a lot of numbers there. Can you just remind me the figure of the storm overflows? You said we had X amount of storm overflows, and you said you had Y, which are up to standard. And can you give me those numbers again, please?
So it was about 1,379 overflows across the region.
1,379, yeah.
And it's between 450 and 500 that are meeting the standards that government have already set. And the reason it's not that precise is we have new data coming in all of the time, and we have to look at the average number of spills over 10 years is the analysis.
So sorry, that leaves
About 800.
About 800.
Yeah, and we're doing 291 within the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Phil, you wanted to come in.
Chair, thanks. It's really a point of technicality, so I can understand. Alan, you said you're addressing them, and what does that actually mean in layman's terms?
So the targets government has set us is that we have to get all of the storm overflows to a target of less than 10 spills per annum on average over 10 years. That's a really complex sentence. So it is. You can see over 10 occur in any 1 year, but it's the average over 10 years that the target is set to. So we've got to take them, and some of them are spilling at 90 times at the minute. We've got to get them right the way down to 10 spills on average over 10 years. It's a frequency. Yes.
Sorry, Alan, I cut you off.
So I did share with Hannah prior to the meeting a link to the National Storm Overflow Action Plan, which you're nodding, thank you, which shows what our investment period will be for all those storm overflows. Now that will need to be updated because we have more information, new information coming in from our event duration monitors. Also, the event duration monitoring data was published on the 31st of March by the Environment Agency. So we have to make a return every year to the Environment Agency, which shows how often and how many spills a year there are from each of those storm overflows. And that information is also available to yourselves and the public as and when they see fit to use it.
And then just to build on what Alan said, we also have what's known as WaterFit Live, which actually shows the status of every storm overflow within an hour of it actually spilling. So you can go on live and see data for every single overflow. Is it discharging or not at any moment in time?
Chair, can I have a quick supplementary? So of those 291 that are in train, how many of those are in Plymouth? And is one of them to do with our shellfish beds, which got declassified last year?
In the next period, we did have more in Plymouth, but they had to get reprioritised alongside the inland bathing waters. So we actually have 11 overflows that are being improved in this 5-year period, and all of those are associated with the bathing waters and shellfish.
Thank you. You did remind me, Alan, that you did kindly send around some information via Hannah prior to the meeting. I should have said that also. Thank you.
Just to clarify as well, within that link that you got on the National Storm Overflow Action Plan, you can go into that, and you can filter on all those storm overflows that operate within your boundary, Plymouth City boundary, and you can see from that exactly when that investment is going to take place. Now that will give you a 5-year period investment, either by 2030, 2035, 2040, but within those 5 years we will be undertaking some, not by the 31st of March 2030, but that's the regulatory timeline in which we need to deliver those. So you can go in and you can play with that, and I think I'm right in saying, Mark, that that's updated on a regular basis to reflect any changes in legislation. So it might change over time as and when some of the regulations may change, or we have to adjust our programme because new things have come in for us to consider.
Thank you. Moving on, I've got Councillor Bannerman next.
Thank you, Chair. With Plymouth Sounds National Marine Park being one of the many jewels in Plymouth's crown, can I ask what South West Water have done or plan to do to ensure the water is safe for bathing and our basking wildlife?
So I recall when I was here last time, a colleague from the Environment Agency came along, Bruce Newport, and spoke about the quality of the bathing waters. So the bathing water quality within your bathing beaches within Plymouth is excellent. I mean, it really is good. So much so that actually it's very difficult sometimes to actually identify or find any E. coli or IE, and it's actually very good. One of the questions that comes back is, but people go swimming outside of the official bathing season, May to September. What monitoring is going to be done outside of that? DEFRA have recently done a consultation, and they've come out with some core principles, and those core principles will be communicated to ourselves, the Environment Agency, yourselves as the leads for the beach manager or the beach owner in most instances for the beaches in Plymouth, and it will potentially give some flexibility over monitoring outside of the season, but that has yet to be confirmed exactly what that means. So there is some flexibility around that. So bathing waters are excellent. The second thing is we have been working very, very closely with yourselves and your officers at Plymouth City on a plan for water, working with Kat Dealey and her team, and that's looking at a number of things. Firstly, how can we work together in and around Plymouth to reduce the impacts of surface water flooding and therefore the impacts on storm overflows? Secondly, what can we do to improve the environment around Plymouth by looking at green solutions to improve situations? And we've also been working closely in the last 4 or 5 months with a company called Rebalance Earth, which I know Plymouth City have also been working with, to look at how can we look at using natural systems to also reduce runoff from those catchments, which will also help with our storm overflows and also help with impacts on water quality as well. So overall, we've been doing actually a lot of planning and a lot of work with your officers within Plymouth to address and to ensure that the sound and the marine area that's protected is protected as best it can be now and improved in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Macleay?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, all three of you, for making yourselves available today. And it's really encouraging to hear that updates are kind of coming down the pipeline, as it were, and great too, there's ambition to deliver these ahead of schedule. Reading through the materials that you gave prior to our meeting today, I was really encouraged to see improvements in bathing water quality in Plymouth over the last couple of years. I was wondering if you could give me, please, an outline of these specific improvements for Plymouth, as well as the percentage of how much of our bills are going to be spent delivering improvements locally.
Okay, so I can't give you a breakdown in terms of how much is being spent specifically within the Plymouth City area at the moment, and therefore what that means for bills, because overall the increases to customer bills are spread across the whole of our customer base. I think, Mark, you may have some rough figures for how much we are going to be investing in Plymouth. The majority of it will be around storm overflows, but there'll be other things that we will be investing in, particularly in the natural environment. So I'm going to pause there, and I think I've answered the best question around customers. I can't give you a direct answer to that, but Mark, do you want to answer anything on investment?
Yes, so the investment programme overall is about 3.2 billion we're going to be spending across the southwest, Bristol and the SES area. Of that, as I said, 764 million is associated with storm overflows, but we're also making quite a number of improvements to wastewater treatment works and improvements at those as well. So actually the improvements to the environment we're making is about 1.3 billion pounds over the 5-year period. So it's quite a significant sum of money. It's also the thing that's driving a lot of the bill increases that we've seen coming through. And those are all being invested through into the environment.
Do you have a supplementary, Chair?
Thank you, Lauren. Before I bring you in on your supplementary, just so you're aware, Alan and team, Hannah's going to be recording the meeting. And for those questions you haven't been able to answer today because you're not an encyclopedia, Hannah will perhaps follow those up and you can provide written questions. It'd be great. Thank you so much. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. It is really encouraging to hear about what a big programme investment is coming down the line, particularly for Plymouth. I did want to point out that 14% of our bills in Plymouth are spent servicing South West Water debt. And also then, according to data released by South West Water, Plymouth Hoe East, which is kind of the jewel in the crown of Britain's Ocean City, that site saw 133 sewage dumps in 2024. So it was the third worst site in terms of storm overflows in the UK last year. So kind of combining that with the 28% increase in our bills, can you give us any assurance that we're seeing value for money in terms of bill payers in Plymouth?
So our plans are heavily scrutinised by various regulators, the Environment Agency and Ofwat, and we have been challenged around how much of that programme are we funding directly and how much we're expecting customers to pay. So the overall storm overflow programme was just over £1 billion, but in the end, the actual sum that is being funded through customer bills is 764 million, which sounds a very big number. It is a very big number, but actually a quarter of that we're dealing with through what we call capital maintenance, and the fact that we recognise that some of those elements have been funded and we needed to make sure that we deliver against those. So I think that gives you a bit of a feel about the extent to which we've challenged ourselves, the efficiencies that we've placed on the programme. In terms of the West Hill, that is one of the overflows that's going to get improved. It is one of those that we are targeting for improvement. So I can give you the assurance that we're working towards and we'll be making those improvements in that space.
Thank you. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. One thing, if you can just keep things really simple for me, because I'm not an expert in this, but it's one of these questions. Sewage in the sea, okay? Why does it happen, okay, in simple terms? And when do you believe you'll be able to stop this happening?
Okay, so let's wind the clock back a little and just talk about, the original form of treatment for sewage, and a lot of our sewers combine both rainwater and sewage into the same pipe. They're called combined sewers. Those have been around since the Victorian ages, and a lot of them were designed originally just to take that sewage out through a long sea outfall and take it straight to the sea. That was the original design philosophy. At the time of privatisation in 1991, about 40% of the discharges were actually treated and had treatment works on them. The other 60% just took sewage straight out to the sea. Now, that was one of the reasons why the whole industry was privatised, to actually drive that investment and those improvements. So within the Southwest, we had the Clean Sweep programme, which put in place lots of new treatment works to actually treat that. And at this moment, our calculations show that we are actually treating something like 97% of all the sewage is being treated before it is then being discharged. So that's 3% that's going over overflows and isn't being treated. The programmes that we're now looking at by 2040 will take us to less than 1% that is going to be spilling through the storm overflows. So we're on a journey, but that journey has already gone quite a significant distance in terms of treatment and putting treatment in place. So that at this moment, there is 3% that's not being treated, and we can do better, and that's what the storm overflow programme is about. But actually, it's a big improvement from where we were at the time of privatisation.
Thank you. And just secondly, obviously, building up to elections and things, this is always a big issue, especially as being a coastal city. And there's always ongoing sort of political statements from various parties. How has this government helped you improve water quality, and how is the council helping you with that dual approach to improve water quality, etc.?
As you can imagine, we have had quite a lot of political change over the period just of the price review itself. I think we're on our third or fourth minister at DEFRA since the actual price review started. The programmes are now, and the key thing from government was A, having clear direction about the standards they wanted us to achieve, and then B, those programmes have then been considered through our regulators in terms of scale and magnitude. That process in our price review is now complete. A determination has been made by the regulators. We as a company have now accepted that. And so actually we're now, all of our focus is around delivery of that. And that really enables us to make those significant investments that are required and therefore drive those improvements. So really great to see that. In terms of local engagement, we are doing a lot of engagement with a number of individuals, Cat Dealey, etc., about what our plans are, and we're working with them around. Here's an example of all the different improvements we're looking at in the Plymouth area and how we can actually deliver a lot of those. And we're looking to do as much through what we call green and blue delivery as possible. There are lots of ways in which you can stop storm overflows spilling. One is to build a great big grey concrete tank, and we'll be doing a few of those. But actually, if we can stop it entering the sewer in the first place and take the water out, and that can be more of a blue solution where we're looking to take it on another pathway. It might be a surface water sewer or something of that nature where it isn't mixing with sewage, it's just going out to the sea. And then there's a green solution whereby we build things like suds where we're allowing the solutions to actually percolate back into the ground. So we're looking at a whole range of those different solutions, and we're working with your officers and teams to look at how do we deliver those most effectively.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess this is really reassuring, sort of with Sir John Cunliffe doing the independent review at the moment, and, you know, it's great news that South West Water and Pennon aiming to reduce CSO, you know, these overflow discharges. And I, you know, got to applaud, I guess, the partnership between yourselves, the council, the National Marine Park, and the MOU that you alluded to earlier. I think that's really, really positive. I guess, you know, it'd be remiss of me not to mention some of the concerns of my residents at this point as well. And I guess I've got a couple of short questions, all kind of link actually. So I guess one of the first pieces, we talked a lot around bathing water. At the moment, we currently have small displays that are put out saying if it's safe to go in or not. Could we look at a digital solution that linked to your monitors to display whether there is a sewage discharge or not? So it should be really simple. Sorry, I'm checking my tie today. Testing. So from this side, I guess my question is, why is testing in one place in bathing waters, designating bathing waters? So we have an issue here whereby it doesn't account for necessarily current, tidal flow and different pieces like this. We've talked around the sort of shortened periods and could that be extended out, but also could we have multiple site monitoring? That was one piece. Third piece, there's only four short pieces, Chair. Should there not be better analysis of the variety of pathogens that come through CSO and our sewage networks into our waterways, both river and sea? Limited to sort of around 8 to 9 pathogens at the minute, by my understanding. Okay, not a lot. And then I guess the other piece from that is with downwater effects of CSO overflows. So this could be a good and a bad piece. And I think it sort of, my question is around that sort of broader understanding of the impact of sewage. So research indicates that, you know, sewage overflow, so CSOs can spread up to sort of 30 to 50 miles from point of source. Do you have much data around where those overflows travel from point of discharge? And then also, I guess, the effects. So, you know, we hear a lot in the media now around this sort of cocktail effect. So it's not necessarily just the sewage, but it's, you know, the detergents that go down, things that are plumbed in incorrectly, how they interact. And I guess also that piece around what the impact of that is. So looking here in Plymouth Sound, you know, there's a big drive to protect our seagrass meadows. We've had lots and lots of efforts by numerous NGOs to plant seagrass. Some of those have had some minor successes, some more than others. But at the same point, we're seeing in other areas huge growth. So Corsan Bay, for example, where we're seeing massive growth in seagrass. So this is a small example of where you could be getting some benefit from the combination of overflow agricultural runoff. Whereas then on the other side of the water, where Jenny Cliff side, where there's been lots of planting, there hasn't been the same level of growth. So I guess the question around that kind of interaction piece and the monitoring there, please.
4 questions, I think.
So I've jotted down a summary, and forgive me if I haven't jotted it down correctly. But in terms of signage, it is the responsibility of the beach owner or the beach manager to put the signage up. But we do make available something called an API, which is the data that's available from our systems to be available on that sign. So that is something that can be done. Generally speaking, signage is a manual process, and somebody will put a sign up either because the Environment Agency have issued a pollution risk forecast, or there's been a sewage outfall that's operated and the sign will go up. But that generally is for the beach manager or the beach owner to do it. There is no scientific reason why a digital sign couldn't be provided. All the data is available there, but that would be for us to make sure that you've got that data and access to it, and whoever the beach owner and the manager is to enact that signage to go up. Mark, have I missed anything?
I mentioned earlier we've got our WaterFit Live site, which has all of the overflows on for South West Water. There is actually a national site as well, which is the National Storm Overflow Hub, where you can see all of the water companies' data, and that generates what Alan calls what we've just described as an API. That includes data on every single storm overflow in the whole of England is available, and anybody can sign up and see that data. So that is actually where SAS get their data from, is that they actually pull from that API. Same with the Rivers Trusts. And so we created that so anybody can access that live data and use it in any way whatsoever. And that API is free. It's available for everybody. So let's work out how we can, if you want to put the signs up, and let's work out how we make those linkages, and you can pull that data directly to any sign you want to put by your bathing water.
Thank you. I think the piece there, yeah, great on the APIs. I guess concern from the council perspective is obviously, you know, our residents are unlikely necessarily to access all of these services. Maybe they will through Service Against Sewage or some of the more prominent ones. But if, you know, this partnership, this MOU that you've described could look to support people with something really tenable, quantifiable like that, would be really great, because then they're turning up to the beach and the data is there for them. And there's live data, Chair, so it should be available.
That's helpful. I think, Councillor McCarthy, that might form a recommendation towards the end of the meeting, because obviously anything that comes out of today will have to go to Cabinet. So that's something you might want to just keep at the back of your mind for a potential recommendation out of today's meeting. Sorry, Mark.
Okay, going on to question number 2. Then multiple sites. The consultation Alan touched on for bathing waters actually did have an element in there about should there be more than one sample point for each bathing water. And again, that a lot of people came back on that consultation. We've not seen the full results of the consultation yet, but I suspect we will get to a point where there will be multiple sampling points for some bathing waters.
I think that's really reassuring. I guess the piece is at this stage, you know, we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, a lot in the press around Sir John Cunliffe, and I guess from that perspective, you know, it's that piece of, it's reassuring that your plans look so positive, but could they be even more positive, I guess, is the question. So good to hear that you take that on board.
Your next question was around, I'm going to summarise it in my own language so I can understand what I'm going to say, is that what's in the storm overflow. So you colleagues, a number of colleagues from this meeting have been invited to our partnership with Crew, Exeter University tomorrow. If you've not signed up, a number of you, then I'd reiterate, please do, because we're expecting a number of people to come along, and one of the presentations is exactly that, which is what is in a storm overflow. And it could be anything from sewage, microplastics, pathogens, forever chemicals, anything that washes off a road that goes into our combined sewer could be in that outfall. It's suffice to say that we are not in a place yet to absolutely categorise the chemical makeup of a storm overflow, but we are working with Exeter University to begin that research. And if anybody is coming along tomorrow, we will be able to explain that in a bit more detail, and you will also be able to see the work that we're doing with the university using the microplastics lab that they've set up to look at how microplastics come from the house into our system and out through our storm overflow, where they come from, so we can go back to the source and maybe talk to suppliers. How can we manage this? How can we manage this getting into our system? Because once it's in the combined system and once it's into the environment, it's no longer controlled. And we need to understand what's in there so that we can work our way back up to understand how we can better control it. But that's something that we're working on, but it's a long journey and it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. Chair, sorry.
That's okay. Just on that, unfortunately, not everybody can make every meeting. And I wonder, tomorrow's meeting, will that go on the website, or is there an opportunity to record aspects of that not only those members present, or any councillor for that matter, but members of the public might be able to explore that journey with South West Water or Pennant?
Yeah, we're not recording it. It's more of an informal conversation. It's more of an educational piece for members of scrutiny committees, because there are common questions that come up in all of the meetings. I can't say we're recording it because it's a partnership. We would need to get the university agreed, but it's an informal conversation to enable some of your members to better understand what research we're doing. Okay.
Question 4.
Question 4 I'm going to take. We're doing a bit of a kind of hand back and forth, Alan, on it. So question 4 was about downstream effects of CSOs. You're quite right. We as a society do not fully understand that you can see dispersal quite quickly within the first few kilometres of a discharge occurring, and then it's actually quite difficult to see the effect. But actually, there's never been any long-term measurement and understanding of the impacts on rivers. So as part of this price review and as part of the Environment Act that happened a couple of years ago, there was a new obligation placed on water companies to monitor upstream and downstream in rivers from every overflow. So what does that mean? For South West Water, we have to install around 410 river water quality monitors upstream and downstream on a number of the inland rivers within the region. And that's about half of the number that needs to be done in total. So we have to deliver them all by 2035. But in the first 5 years, we've got 410 that we need to deploy. And that data is then required to be placed in the public domain within an hour as well. And that's going to be picking up a whole series of parameters. There's only 8 at the moment, but the devices themselves are multi-probed monitors that as new probes come online to be able to measure different things, then they will be expanded and put in place. I would love to say that there's a probe that measures bacteria at the minute, but there isn't. And so at the moment it's a lot of straight chemical type processes. The only thing that's really measuring sewage as such is ammonia. But those probes are going to be a massive increase in the level of data that is visible about the impacts on rivers. And you know, actually, it may prove that actually a lot of the discharges may have no impact on the rivers, or it may actually say the opposite. We don't know until we see this data, but there's going to be an explosion of that data in the next 5 years as those monitors come online, and they will all be in the public domain.
Thank you. I think that will help us to understand where those effects go, because we know the sewage has an effect and it has an impact, whether that's, you know, algal bloom, whether it's, you know, storm runoff and its eutrophication. There's lots of impacts on the marine environment, you know, and I guess the piece is knowing where, and it comes back to the bathing water piece as well, knowing where those impacts are the worst and where they possibly have some potential gain. And I think if there's that data and there's that understanding, you know, we can all be in a better situation at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to bear in mind is we're not the only source of things going into rivers. You know, storm overflows are something that is measured, but that doesn't mean that it's the only thing that's happening. And so we do know that when the EA classifies what it calls reasons for not achieving good status, only 12% of those are actually allocated to the water companies in the southwest. The other 88% of those are related to other sources. And one of the things we do in many of our investigations is we go and we do sampling that is actually linked back to DNA to see what are the causes. And what we're generally finding when that data comes back is that there's usually about a third of it linked to bovine and land runoff from farm animals. About a third of it is usually associated with avian, and therefore it's coming from seagulls and birds and things and so forth. And then the remaining third is linked to sewage, and that could be, you know, septic tank discharges, or it could be, you know, storm overflow discharges. So that data already says there are lots of different sources that are contributing towards those impacts. What the river water quality monitors will do is we can start to see the data specifically associated with overflows and really start to understand that. But we will also see lots of other effects that are happening in the rivers. And so where there is a lot of runoff happening from a farmyard, we will see that in the river. You will see a spike coming through. So it will measure everything, not just the things that are associated with water companies.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I enjoyed reading your Green First framework and your commitment to nature-based solutions and things like that, particularly with regards to sort of SUD schemes. And residents in my ward are soon going to benefit from a SUD scheme in Trefusis Park. The document refers to kind of the decision-making process once you've identified a scheme or a need. But could you talk a little bit to what the process for identifying that need is, or potential for a scheme, how the council kind of feeds into that, and also actually what role maybe ward councillors could play in that process for identifying where we need a solution like that, or where that's an option?
Yeah, the need for the overflows is actually driven by the guidance that both DEFRA and the Environment Agency have set for the water companies. And that is pretty much based around the spill frequency that is occurring, and the higher the spill frequency, the more it's identified in terms of need and so forth. There are about 5 to 10 different rules in the middle of that guidance, and we've had to follow all of that guidance in terms of you know, the priorities. The priorities have been bathing waters and shellfish first, and then it's into inland discharges that are close to sensitive sites, things like triple SIs and things of that nature. So we've followed that guidance. That's helped us prioritise the 15-year programme over those years, and it has been pretty much targeted based upon the impact and the sensitivity to impact, whether that's bathing water, shellfish, etc. And then it's about spill frequency at that point. So that's how we've identified the priorities across the years. And then when we actually get into the work in the catchments itself, it's about looking at how do we manage it within the catchments? Are there opportunities for green, for blue solutions, or do we have to fall back to a grey solution because actually there isn't enough inputs into that. Now, one of the things I would say is when we talk about how do we collaborate and how do we develop these solutions together, people see that as, oh, well, does that mean you want money from us to do that? Actually, what we need more than anything else is that engagement and looking for those opportunities. Because actually, in a lot of cases, it's about access to land to be able to put a subs in place or to put some form of storage in place. So, that engagement is absolutely vital around where can we actually build and construct these types of solutions. And actually, the more we can do green, the better.
And I guess just to add to that, and we've talked a lot about our existing networks and the existing position as it currently sits. Obviously, we recognise we've got growth, development growth, we've got climate change, we've got a lot of other influencing factors on our networks, over and beyond just dealing with the here and now. So I guess, if you talk about sort of the engagement piece, and this is certainly where sort of my world is, and we do a lot of work already, and we want to do even more around engaging with councils, council members, officers around, where that growth's coming forward. And you talk about some of the SUD solutions, that we've made, or the industry has made some quite significant steps forward over recent years. So one of the issues, not the only issue, but one of the issues around SUDs and all that implementation was, okay, you put them in the ground, but who's going to maintain them going forward? And there was a whole load of, confusion around who would take the lead on those things. Those leads are now becoming more clear. In terms of how we do that. So absolutely, there are provisions now, there's legislation now in terms of driving some of those things. We do an awful lot now with our developer customers around green solutions. What we're always trying now to do is to make sure, and I think it was Alan spoke earlier around combined systems, i.e. those that have got foul and surface water connected to them. And ultimately, it's generally the surface water, as you can probably imagine, that creates us the capacity issues. And it's around those storms and those more intense storms that we're now getting. So our process around making sure that we don't connect surface water to those networks any longer. We find other ways of discharging that surface water and ideally getting it back into the ground if we can, but recognising in some of the more built up areas that's a little more challenging in finding those opportunities. So there's some great opportunities. I think we need to keep collaborating and working closely together. Alan talked earlier around some of the combined benefits. If you talk about surface water flooding, somebody said earlier on around surface water runoff, some of those other impacts that you've got that are over above just the sewerage networks themselves. Clearly there are some opportunities there for collaborative working where we can get multiple benefits, by pooling our resources and pooling our skill sets really around really come up with those right solutions.
Thank you. Councillor Sproston.
Thank you. I've heard a lot today about the bathing waters, the impact on rivers and water quality, which sounds really progressive and good. However, I want to go on a bit of a tangent. I want to talk about the sewage works, essentially. And in relation, for example, Camel's Head, and talk about air quality. Because what we have around some of these sewage works is built up communities, and in the summer there is a distinctive smell, which has got to a point where a lot of people are keeping their windows shut in the summer. There's kids stop using the parks, and it's becoming a huge problematic issue. Now, my concern is as we're moving forward and we're talking about housing growth and everything, and we've talked about the liaison with yourselves and the councils, we haven't really addressed the kind of community impact and some of these people that are suffering whilst living around these sewage treatment plants. So I just wanted to ask about moving forward and the preventative measures that are going to be put in place. And in all these kind of works and offerings, whilst we're talking about moving forward and the investments that are going to be put into it, is there a priority on community impact? And is there amongst the reports, I couldn't see anything in regards to built up areas having any more priority than anything else.
Thank you. Can I add into that what you're thinking of response? It's the same issue. We have the Plymouth Pond, which has had national coverage. It's the same issue on a much larger scale. So I'll be interested to hear your response on those.
So one of the things we do keep a close look at is the number of odour contacts that we get from sewage treatment works, and we do track what's occurring. We do have various chemicals we can dose which can reduce the odour levels, so I can take back and understand what has been put in place at Camel's Head and whether there's anything we can do to improve that. The difficulty for many of the sewage treatment works are that they were actually constructed a very long time ago, in a lot of cases before the housing was close to them, and the housing has moved closer over the years. But at the same time, people are very conscious of those, and we need to look at that. So if I can take that away specifically about Camel's Head, we are also looking at what is the right level of sewage treatment and what is the right processes across all of Plymouth as well. And there are opportunities that we are looking at potentially around, can we rationalise, can we reduce the number of sewage treatment works and therefore take it to other locations. But I can't promise that that's an outcome that we've got at the minute. That is something we're exploring. But what I will do is I'll take back and understand what odour control we've got in place at Camel's Head and respond to that specifically.
I do have many more speakers, but I had a question about the infrastructure in terms of water treatment plants. So I think it's probably a good opportunity to throw that in, and I'll bring other members in. But understanding the lifespan of the current treatment plants that Plymouth benefits from, so understanding their lifetime span and capacity, and then aligning that with the very ambitious plans, which you understand Plymouth's ambitious growth plans. Where are we? So the lifespan of the current water treatment plants, and then going forward, where's the growth coming from in order to assist Plymouth achieve its development plans?
So a typical life of a sewage treatment works is around 50 years to 70 years. The plants have a whole series of different assets that are on there. So individually, different assets are at different points in their life cycle at any time. But particularly as we make enhancements, and a lot of the works originally, as we said earlier, started off as a discharge point, and then we built treatment in and so forth. So it's difficult to say which works is coming to the end of its life or not coming to the end of its life. We do a regular appraisal of the capacity of those works every 5 years, and we assess, well, with all the growth that's occurred in and around that area, what does it look like? How's it performing? Are there particular elements that are causing a pinch point? And then we match and look at that alongside, what growth is occurring in the area. Now, at the moment, if I just touch on a couple of them, so Ernie Settle, for instance, there's a lot of growth happening in Saltash at the moment, and that is currently piped across the Tamar to Ernie Settle and treated at Ernie Settle. So one of the options we're now looking at is to service that growth. Do we create a new treatment works on the Saltash side that then frees up capacity on the Ernie Settle side for growth and development in the Plymouth area? And then Plymouth Central is certainly a works we are looking closely at the moment in terms of future capacity and need, because a lot of that is linked to the storm overflow spills and do we need to increase capacity at Plymouth Central. So that is one thing that we're looking closely at as well. But all of those appraisals and the outputs of those are actually made part of the DWMP plan we produce every 5 years, and we'll be looking to actually take that and make that visible on our website as a live document, and therefore as those appraisals of each works are completed, they would be in the public domain as well in terms of what capacity and growth. Now, if we look at the new growth that is coming on board, we've catered in our DWMP for the 10,000 properties that are in Plymouth itself, but now there is a new target that the Labour government has set of 1.5 million additional properties in England over the life of Parliament. And of course, we don't know where in England those 1.5 million properties are, and we really do want to engage with yourselves about what are your plans and ambitions, as well as every other council within the southwest area, to understand what does that look like and where are those points going to be, because we can then factor that into our plans. Now, one of the challenges we have in our plans is we go through the pressure review process every 5 years. So additional capacity at treatment works has to be forecast and predicted about 7 years out of the business plan to be able to get the money and get the funding to actually then be able to start building it. So we really do need to start that engagement process as soon as we can so that we can flag it up through our price review process. Whereas investment in the network itself can actually be funded through developer charges, and Ian will touch a bit more about that. But that's a bit more agile in terms of making the connections. But forward investment in the treatment works is certainly something where the earlier the dialogue, the clearer we are that which treatment works it's going to and in what form will be quite useful to help us do our forward planning for those treatment works.
So I'm grateful. Thanks, Councillor. I'll bring you in a moment. Whilst it's difficult to tell me, and I appreciate you say lifespan of 50 to 70 years, it's difficult to pin down in response each treatment plan's forecast lifespan. You mentioned two, you said Ernest Settle and Plymouth Central and Marsh Mills, yeah? So, yeah, Plymouth Central. Okay. So those two examples that you gave, in terms of capacity, are you able to indicate to the panel in terms of what's the capacity currently for those two examples, or in fact all of them? Are you able to disclose that today?
That's not something I've got with, but at the moment all of our plans all of our plans show that we have the capacity to serve new development and growth in those areas up to 2035. But we need to start investing now so that the capacity is available beyond 2035.
Thank you, Chair. It's a related question. I can't resist the opportunity to ask the question because I've never had a straight answer, particularly not from you guys, but from my own team. But you talk about the infrastructure. I'm thinking of the network here. You said some of it dates back to the Victorian era. How confident are you that you've got that network mapped out, and do you have it in one place? Could I see it?
So we have all of our networks mapped out in terms of the sewer networks, and there's a big tunnel system for Plymouth. We have that on our record system. You can come and see that. We can talk through that in more detail. The one thing that we don't have mapped is there was a transfer of private sewers that occurred in 2011, and so some of the very local sewers, it could be terraced housing or things of that nature, where the local sewers in the back gardens aren't all mapped. Yeah, but we have an inference of what we believe those sewers are and the activity that's occurring there, and that we have been picking up records where those records are available to bring those into our system.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. So it's all really interesting, actually. This is fascinating to listen to. I wanted to bring it back inland a little bit from a lot of the focus at sea and look at rivers. So the ecological status for rivers and surface water in the southwest, I think 146 out of 691 are rated as good. One of the ones that says it requires improvement is the Plymouth Tamar water body, and it failed the chemical component of the test in 2019. This was actually drawn out in Councillor McCarthy's question, but I wonder if you could explain more where these priority hazardous substances are originating from and how you're working with other partners, such as farmers in the dockyard, to deliver improvements.
So just to be clear, the reasons for not achieving good status is an Environment Agency responsibility. So through their monitoring, that may be through chemical monitoring or biological monitoring, they will make a determination as to whether or not the reasons why that particular water body isn't achieving its target is either down to agriculture, urban runoff, water treatment works, or a water company. If it's a water company, is it sewage treatment works? If it's a sewage treatment works, is it because it's phosphate or something else coming out those sewage treatment works? So there's a lot of data in there. Now that data drives any investment that we need to make under the Water Industry National Environment Programme, or WINEP, because we all like a good acronym, don't we? And that WINEP has been agreed with the Environment Agency. So over the next 5 years, in order for us to maintain the status or to improve the status, that will drive what we need to invest in, where and for what reason. So that's all available. Again, the Environment Agency have made that information available. I've looked at it. It's very complicated, but they've made that information available, and what that shows is what we will be investing in by what period in order to address what particular issue. So that's specifically about the water industry and what we need to do as South West Water. And we also get monitored against that. So as part of the EPA, the Environmental Performance Assessment, we actually get monitored and rated against our delivery of the WINEP as one of the measures. And that Environmental Performance Assessment for 2024 will come out in July of this year. In terms of addressing other issues, we do a lot of work with the agricultural sector through our natural catchment management plans, and one of the examples is on the River Plym, where we're working with Rebalanced Earth, Plymouth City Council, National Trust, Dartmoor National Park, to see what we can do collectively in order to address some of the issues within the River Plym. Equally, we also have a number of projects that are called upstream thinking, where we go into particular catchments to look what we can do in order to improve water quality that will actually be beneficial for ourselves as a water company, but there will be other knock-on effects in terms of water quality improvements to other water bodies. So the WINEP drives what we do. That's Environment Agency data that tells us what we need to do in the future. That's almost a contract. We have to deliver that in 5-year periods. And the reason why we do it is to either maintain what we've got or to improve it because it's not currently meeting the standards that they set out.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Sproston. Thank you, Chair. I hope so. I mean, I'm a councillor for Honnicknall Ward, which has only settled treatment works, in its area. So I have issues which I won't bring up here today about what's going on down there and how many times, like 150 times last year, that overflow was sent off, not necessarily at the right time, an outgoing tide. But I haven't mentioned that. I want a slightly different tack, because you are here in front of us today. You've come as representatives of South West Water, and I am a representative in some ways of the residents of Honnicknall. And we've heard mention already of customer bills going up in relation to paying for upcoming improvements to water quality. And believe it or not, I'm old enough to remember when I could just pay my water rates and hold my MP accountable if things weren't right. Shocking as that seems. But my point I'm getting to is, despite starting with no debt in 1999, at the start of privatisation, South West Water's paid out approximately 4.5 billion in dividends to its stakeholders or shareholders, and yet has still accrued 3.1 billion in debt. And now customers are footing the bill for the improvements that are coming up. So how would you rationalise that dividend debt charges juxtaposition to one of our residents? And just one quick addition to that is, do you drink water straight from the tap?
I'll answer the second question first. Yes, I do. And actually, the UK drinking water standards are one of the best in the world. They are actually one of the best in the world. And when I go abroad to Spain and France, sometimes I do drink bottled water, but I don't here. I do drink straight from the tap.
That's bottled. That's tap water. Sorry,
yeah,
not bottled
and I'm
water.
hoping this is tap water as well.
In the office before I left.
We did have a conversation ahead of this meeting that around dividends and shares with the chair and colleagues, and this isn't the place to have this conversation. The place to have this conversation is either at our AGM or Watershare Plus, where these conversations can happen. We're here to talk about our operations. We're here to talk about our investment plans. We're not in a position to answer any questions about dividends and debt. There are other places where those conversations are quite rightly had, in a place where there are those experts and those people that are shareholders of the company you can ask that question. And Chair, I believe we
Alan,
had that
thanks.
conversation.
I'm grateful for that response, but it's absolutely right. It's not expected of you, nor it is within your gift to discuss about share dividends. That's a matter for the chief exec and the board members of the company. I'm really keen that we take advantage of the opportunity of having you here to talk about things that we haven't quite discussed yet in terms of our own aspirations. May I interject with a question at this stage? I do have others on the list. And I am very interested in understanding what we've talked around, but we haven't talked directly at, is whether we have the infrastructure in place now. We have an aging network in terms of pipes. You set that out in your early responses, Victorian network. And what's keeping South West Water awake at night in terms of matching our aspirations for our infrastructure growth? Are you confident that South West Water has identified where we need the improvements and that you have capacity to install those improvements that's not going to stymie our aspirations of development or delay an impact on those? Could you talk a little bit and give us some reassurance in that regard?
Absolutely, I'll pick that one up. So, so because perhaps it might be helpful, I'll just go back a step in terms of how we think we engage with the process in both the strategic side through your sort of local planning process, where we have got all of those local plans from across the region, and we have built all of those. And as Mark said earlier, they are intrinsically built into our drainage and wastewater management plans, and also in terms of our water resource management plans, which we've not talked about today, but obviously, we've talked a lot about sewage disposal, but we haven't talked about its availability of water and our ability to get it to where it needs to get to. But the reality is the process we go through is very similar for both of those things. So I think it's a fairly generic response I'm going to give you. So we go through that whole process. We've analysed where we are. We're very aware of your joint local plan and the aspirations that are already within that joint local plan. I think what we're not quite so aware of at the moment, and Mark alluded to it earlier, is around the additional growth that no doubt you're going to be challenged to deliver, as is every other council. And we do a lot of these in terms of the engagement process. So as part of that process, we would like to really engage with you and actually work collaboratively with you going forward to understand a number of things. So one will be around where. Equally important to us is when, because obviously we talked just now around the investment in our networks that we are required to make as part of this. So we have an obligation as a statutory undertaker to facilitate growth. So that is something that is within our licence in terms of making sure that we can keep sustainable growth within our areas. Obviously, with any investment programme, we have a limited amount of money, and we need to make sure that we deliver that in the right areas at the right time, so that we're able to align those things. So we do a lot of work around trying to get that sorted. In terms of network growth, so if we put treatment to one side, and Mark's already talked about the treatment provision around how we assess and increase capacity at our treatment works, but if we take the network side of things, we charge all developers what we know as an infrastructure charge. So as part and parcel of any developer or developer customer joining to our network, they pay us an infrastructure charge. That infrastructure charge is used for us to invest in the network to add capacity for growth as and when it's required. So it's not specific to a particular area where they'll pay a development and it's related. It's a general pot, but it's what we have to use in order to make those network improvements. So we have to work very carefully, and you talked just now around the assessment. So we look at across South West Water. So when I talk about South West Water, it'll sound a little odd, but we bought Bournemouth Water a little while ago now, so it's actually part of our process. But across Devon, Cornwall and Bournemouth, my team look at something in the region of 30,000 planning applications a year. Now, that's not all of the planning applications, but it's all of those applications which arguably might have an impact on our network. So is it going to put sewage into our network? Is it going to require water from our network? And the third thing we look at is around whether or not it's going to be built near our assets, in which case, is it going to impact that asset either during construction or alternatively our ability to maintain it going forward. So we look at that and we try to respond to all those applications that have got that as an impact. Now, some of those will be, actually we have plenty of capacity and we're quite happy with that. We will always try and respond back now with regards to water efficiency advice. So we're always trying to work with the local authorities to try and, through the planning process, to try and deliver water efficient properties. And the other real big requirement, there's some other things we would ask for, is around surface water management. So I talked about earlier around, you know, the impact that surface water has on our networks. And so we're always asking to what we know as a surface water hierarchy, and it starts with trying to get water back into the ground, and then the last resort, some way down the hierarchy, is it connects to our network. So in terms of, can I give you categoric that every application that's coming forward has got capacity in the network? No, I can't give you that. What I can give you is we've got a process, I'll give you assurance on, is we have an absolute process for identifying this. We do this well in advance of it coming forward. I guess the one thing I didn't mention just now is the other thing, and it's generally around the national house builders, but we hold key account relationship with all of those organisations, and we do that to try and give us as much insight as we can around timing. Because we recognise that the councils can have their plans around where they see the strategic growth, but ultimately, in a lot of instances, it will be the developers coming forward, purchasing that land and developing on that land. So we try and get that sort of triangular motion, if you like, around understanding what it will be, to make sure that we then say, okay, fine, if we've got a network improvement around our wastewater network or our drinking water network, we put it in our investment plan aligned with the development plans, aligned with your plans, to make sure that those things align. Now, there will be instances sometimes, you know, where we'll get a plan application comes through, it's an ad hoc application, and we might need to ask for what we know as a timing clause. So we might need to say, look, this is coming, it's not in the plan, it's a speculative development that's come forward, but we recognise some of the challenges that some of the local authorities are under around delivering their quota numbers. And therefore, we will sometimes ask for a delay that says, okay, and arguably it wouldn't then tend to be longer than about 18 months, but we would say, okay, to give us enough chance to make that investment so that the impact on the environment is not detrimental, we would want some time to do that. And generally speaking, we've got some really great relationships with officers to make that happen.
Thank you, that's reassuring. I have Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up on the point and actually look for some clarification, Mark, when you were asked about the capacity to cope with growth, you talked about a timeline that took us out to 2035, and that you probably need at least 7 years heads up of a significant development. And we're looking at potentially 10,000 new homes in the city centre. It's been talked about for an awful long time. There's no planning at the moment, and it's certainly more than in number terms than the government are going to ask us for. Are you already having discussions with City Council about how and if there is a capacity issue, or are the numbers that Mark was talking about as capacity up to 2035, does that include some of the growth that we are expecting? Is that already playing into your thinking?
So we already have the numbers that are in your local plan and agreed today. And as you update the local plan, we will work with you and look at how does that get assessed and brought into our next version of the drainage and wastewater management plans. I think the thing that is probably keeping us up a bit at the night is we don't know what that 1.5 million properties is or where it's going to be. And so that's the bit we really need to work together around because of those long timelines in assessing capacity, understanding where they are. So in answer to your question, some of the 10,000 are definitely already included in the plan, and whatever is in your local plan is already part of our plan. We have regular liaisons. Paul Bernard and I sit down every quarter and we talk about what are the planning issues that are coming forward. So we are taking it into account in the plan. I think we're on top of it, but like anything, there's always more you can do, and there is always another conversation to occur. And particularly, we're all wanting that clarity of where is that 1.5 million properties. And it's not just you, every council in the region we're talking to is in exactly the same position. And you know, we all want to get into that dialogue and understand that so that we can plan it out effectively, because the only way we're going to have certainty is by planning it out.
Thank you. I've just another couple of councillors on my list. Councillor Bannerman.
Councillor Rainsford took some of my question, but it was it was around the 10,000 homes planned for the city centre. You talked earlier about the Plymouth Central plan. So do you feel that that's, you know, got the capacity to manage them new homes, Or is there some necessary infrastructure planned to be installed to service them homes?
So as I said, at the moment we are taking into account what we do know about those 10,000 properties. We recognise that we need to do more work at Plymouth Central. It is quite an aged plant now, and it is designed in a particular way because it's across multiple stories. And so there's quite a lot we need to do to maintain that treatment works and look at how that goes. So that is an area of focus for us, mainly because of we recognise the unique nature of that plant and the work we need to do at that. At the same time as we're designing that, though, we need to take into account that forward forecast of demand that's coming through. So understanding with some certainty what that forward forecast looks like is going to be quite important as we go into designing a new works in and around that location.
I think the other important thing to note is 10,000 homes. Plymouth's quite unique because it has a number of sewage treatment works, where some other cities just have one. Therefore, your planning will be different for one than it will be for 4 or 5. So we need to know exactly where those homes are. But equally, is it 10,000 homes of one person? Is it 10,000 homes of 2 or 3? That detail, as Mark was saying just now to the council at the end, that, you know, it's as and when we have those conversations, we can get more and more detail to help us hone in better on that information. So at the moment, a plan may say, I'm not picking here, it may say we need 5,000 homes here, but it doesn't say how big those homes are, and therefore it doesn't relate to how many people will be in there. And it's quite specific to us because there's quite a simple formula that we use in order to determine what that means for increased sewage within our network. So as you get more information about exactly where and what, we can take that to work out how it's going to be managed in more detail.
And I think just reiterating something I said previously is that, you know, it will be around the rate at which those 10,000 are delivered as well. So often, you know, we talked about already around our existing plans. What we're always trying to do is to understand when is that trigger that we need to get to when we're starting to get close to capacity in the network where we need to intervene prior to it becoming a problem. So, you know, as I say, there's a whole host of things that we need to understand. We clearly work very closely with you know, your officers already. You know, I'm already in my head thinking, you know, we need to do some more reaching out, I think, to try and, you know, just make sure. And it almost feels like a sense check might be helpful as to us sharing what we know about, and for your officers to say, yes, that's exactly where we are at the minute, or alternatively, we actually know about where we are. And some of those might be at formative stages at the minute. We'd rather know now, you know, we're recognising that some of them may come to fruition and some of them might not.
Before I bring in Councillor McCarthy, who's next on my list, just on that point, whilst I appreciate you have regular meetings with Paul Barnard and others through your ongoing liaisons, are there any, take that question the other way around, are there any particular parts or areas of Plymouth, and I include the city centre in that, where we are, most of our aspiration is, that are restricted in terms of capacity? It's been difficult to get a concrete answer in respect of, do we have sufficient capacity citywide? Are there any areas in Plymouth where there are restrictions? And more importantly, if there are, have they been communicated to the planning department or through Paul Barnard?
So I spoke to a colleague yesterday about this in preparation for this meeting, as you could probably imagine, and you know, they were able to give me confidence around, you know, some of the larger developments, all recognising they're not necessarily the city centre ones, but you know, in terms of where we are, the work that we've got planned to deal with some of those. So, you know, I can sit here now and say that we, you know, where we have got capacity issue, we've got investment aligned with that. So that's really positive. I think, you know, the other question around, you know, the overarching capacity, it will depend on where it is, because the reality is it's not, one of the questions I think we were asked in terms of how many houses we've got capacity for. It's a very difficult question to answer, because obviously we've got multiple networks within, you know, catchments within Plymouth itself, and therefore depending on where they're going, it's a little bit more of a challenge. But so I think, you know, as I say, I think at the moment I'm sat here, you know, I'm not concerned about it, you know, but clearly, you know, the devil is in the detail, and we need to work that through.
Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, follow on one really from what Councillor McClay was asking around on the Tamar earlier, and I appreciate sort of the relationship with the EA, and I also acknowledge sort of the great work that started on the Plym. But, and again, forgive me, sort of 2022 data suggests sort of 111 days of overflow from PSDY2, the North Yard, and 35 days from Camel's Head. So they're two of the areas that, you know, we've talked around the communities and that impact. And I appreciate you've said there's going to be a reduction in CSO spills, but at the same point, are those on the focus areas? Because they're huge numbers. You know, they're some of the biggest in the city. So are they going to be dealt with as a priority, or is it going to be other areas first?
So at the moment, we've got two streams running. One is the environmental programme that we've agreed with the Environment Agency, and that's very much focused about the bathing waters and shellfish, and neither of those are bathing waters and shellfish at this moment. But we are also running an internal programme where we're looking at using our maintenance around which are the overflows that are spilling most and targeting our efforts at those as well. So if they're high spillers, we will be picking them up through that programme, but they are not subject to the same constraints. So in those, we're just trying to reduce the frequency of spills that are occurring at those locations, not necessarily getting them below the 10 spill standard, because the 10 spill standard is, as the main environmental programme comes around, that will be when we'll be subject to that target and that deliverable. So we will target them for reductions, but actually they'll only achieve the 10 spill standard as already set out within our longer term 15-year programme.
I mean, that'd be great if it could achieve that in the 15-year programme, because obviously we're talking about two locations that are upriver of the three bathing waters that we have in the city. So, you know, the impact of them, although we discussed earlier, could be negligible because we don't know how the distance that it dissipates over, because you said the data is not there. But with new data, those 400 sensors coming online, hopefully, you know, that'll either become a bigger priority or you'll resolve it in 15 years. So that's fantastic news.
And we will be reprioritising the programme over the 15 years as new data and new information comes online. It's not that we've set it in 2024 and that's it for 15 years. We will be reviewing it every 5 years.
That's really promising. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, final question on my list.
Thanks, Chair. It's been really great to hear your plans, and it sounds like we're aligned in lots of ways, and it sounds like there is good communication, collaboration, all of that stuff. But I think as we wrap up, just want to touch on kind of the risks to those plans and what kind of the threats to those plans coming off and working are. Big one is climate change, obviously. So what is your assessment of the impact that that's going to have on your plans or could have on your plans, and kind of what steps are you taking to mitigate that? And feel free to talk about any other threats or risks that you've identified as well, please. Thank you.
So our design around the storm overflow programme has already taken into account the best climate science that is available at this moment in time. And by that, just to give you a bit of a scale of how much work have we done around that. So we have an industry standard set, what's called a time series of storms that is tested. And so what we've done is we've done lots of computer simulations of hydraulic models of sewer networks. And in total for the Southwest, we did 18,500 model simulations across all of our storm overflows to understand not just what is required today, but what is going to be required in the future and the impacts of climate change on top of that. So we've used those models to kind of look at what is the worst case scenario and are we designing things to meet those needs of the future. So that all sounds fantastic, and the risk for me is that climate change actually starts to change quicker than those forward assumptions at the moment. And so I do see that as a risk. And you know, whilst we've done all of that and it's great, and that's the basis of the costing and everything that we've done for the storm overflows, if climate change does start to adapt quicker and the pace of climate change is faster, then we're going to have to revisit that as we go through. Now, because we're reviewing the programme every 5 years, I think there are sufficient checkpoints to enable that to occur. But then I look at, we've had 2 very wet years in a row at the minute. And when you're designing to a standard, which is 10 years on average, and you're only supposed to get 2 wet years in a 10-year cycle, we've just had them. So there is a bit of climate change does worry me. We've done everything we humanly can in terms of modelling and assessing them. but I'm also conscious that the weather does appear to be a bit wetter, and it has been for the last 2 years. Hopefully that means it's not going to be as wet this year and other years, but now I've said that, I need to touch some wood. So that's the thing we're working through, yes.
Ian, did you want to come in?
Yeah, first again, and not quite to the same level as climate change. Obviously, Mark's talked about that very eloquently. But I guess the other thing for me, with all of these things, is around some of the work we've not talked about it today, but some of the work we do as a business around customer behaviours. So whether that be using the sewers for sewage, not putting all sorts of other things, whether that be wet wipes, whether that be fat oils and greases, whether all those things that impact us on a daily basis for our ability to use the system as it should be used. We do an awful lot of work with whether it's food establishments and some of those other things around making sure that they're not just putting their oils and greases down the system, which create us all sorts of problems. And in addition to that, there's some other things around what's something that we know as urban creep. So when the whole adage where your kids grow up, they get a car, you pave your front garden because you want to put extra cars on it. Oh, by the way, you put that into the system, and so there's a whole load of customer behaviour things in there. So it's a societal thing, really, and it's a difficult challenge for us. It's one that we are up for, but we are trying to look at. And then I mentioned earlier on around trying to encourage water efficient properties. We are now, we actually just literally launched a incentive scheme for developers to do exactly that. So to produce water efficient properties over and beyond the building reg standards that are required of them. And we will incentivise them financially for doing that. For all the reasons that we don't, because our resources are precious, and we've got to look after them. And we talk about climate change. What we don't want to be, in an ideal world, we use our resources more responsibly rather than just creating more resources. Now, we have done that. So you'll be aware probably within Cornwall, back in 2022, where we delivered, repurposed some quarries to provide additional water resources for us for the customers of Cornwall. And we're continuing to look at, we've got a desalination plant that we're looking at the minute. So we've got lots of things that we are looking at around doing that. But in an ideal world, we use what we've got more effectively, and then we think about building additional capacity.
I'd just like to build on that if we can. So one of the things we're seeing a lot at the moment is use of electric cars. I have an electric car myself. And as a result, people are now wanting to pave over their front gardens more so that they can get their car close to their property so that they can charge it. Fully understand that. And actually those applications come into yourselves for approval, and Paul Bernard and I were chatting about this because I think what we've got to do is encourage people to use things like permeable paving rather than tarmac, so that actually the runoff, the rain runoff that occurs from those spaces is actually soaking away into the ground rather than running overland and finding its way into the sewer, mixing with sewage and then spilling over an overflow. So I think that's something we can all work together around, because society is changing. They're wanting to be able to charge at home, quite rightly, and I can understand the value of that. It's a lot cheaper. But how do we work together so that it's actually not having that further impact on the environment?
That's a good example, and there are other members. I'm a member of the planning committee, and there are other members here who also sit on the planning committee, and this is something, the permeable driveways is something that comes up quite frequently. Alan, I'll bring you in, and then I have a question from Phil, please.
So just one other thing, and this is where I suppose we require the help of others. So in terms of building regulation control, you as a council have to ensure that they are built with to the current standards. But are the current standards actually the right current standards for the future impacts of climate change? So anything we can do to actually tighten those standards for new builds as we go forward is absolutely the right thing to do. Are they future-proof, the current standards? I would argue they're probably not, and they probably need to be looked at in more detail from a government perspective. The other thing that we do find as well is there are lots of instances where we have illegal or misconnections because people have extended their property and things like that. And I know resources are tight. Equally, once the customer is connected to maybe the wrong place on our system, South West Water picks up that risk and has to deal with it. So there are some things we can do further up the line that maybe help us in the longer term in terms of building regs inspections as well. Then the societal thing, who knows what society is going to do and how they're going to respond to climate change. But that's one thing that can make a difference in terms of poo and paper. I always describe it as, are you seeing somebody at a garage putting diesel in a petrol car, or vice versa? The car goes splutters and stops. That's what it's like when other things other than poo and paper go in our sewage system. It causes things to go wrong. It causes blockages. Each blockage costs a significant sum to remove. If it doesn't go in there in the first place, we don't need to remove it, spend the money, and we can spend it on other things. So there's many things that I think we can do as a society, but also we can do ourselves as well as others.
I'm grateful, and I will invite you, once we've heard from Phil, to it will be your opportunity to an ask of the local authority, and you've mentioned some things, and we've captured that in terms of ongoing dialogue and what have you. But let's bring Phil in, and then we can move to recommendations and let you gents go.
Chair, thanks very much. I'll be as quick as I can. Just on that last point, I think there's a lot we, the Highways Department and Planning Department, can do to continue to work together to make it easier for us all. There is a segue into this question. It's almost as if we planned this, but you spoke earlier about your net zero ambition, something that's very important to Plymouth City Council. What does that look like? Is it about decarbonising your fleet? Is it solar powering your plants? Is it funded? Lots of questions there. Hopefully, simple answer.
It's about all of those plus. So if I talk about storm overflows, go back to there. We don't want storm overflows operating in the way they do. They operate because things are going into our network that aren't there. If they weren't there, we wouldn't have to turn our pumps on so often to do it, and we could reduce our energy costs significantly. So that's the first thing. Stop things going in that don't need to be there. You're absolutely right. We are, as Pennon, we have a renewables policy, and we do acquire, and we are building solar farms to power the business. That's the next thing we can do. The next thing we can do is a societal change. Currently, the per capita consumption of an individual in this region is high. They use on average 150 litres a day. I know what my family uses, 298 litres a day, which is 3 people, which is less than 100, which is less than the target that the government is setting, which is 110. So there are some changes that society needs to properly consider in order for us to do that. There are planning things that we can do that can improve it. So it's a whole basket of measures, but it's not one thing in one place. It has to be fit for purpose, it has to be sustainable, and it has to be deliverable and maintainable over a period of time.
Alan, Ian, Mark, thank you so much for your attendance today. You've been dealing with questions for over an hour and 35 minutes now, which is unusual for Scrutiny. So we're grateful for not only your attendance, but taking the wide range of questions. I hope you found this process useful. What I invite you to do, we'll certainly be talking when you leave the room about whether we should make any recommendations to our cabinet, which is the process that Scrutiny follows. It is an opportunity for you after today to reflect on what you've been asked and what you've been able to disclose to us. If there, whilst I acknowledge you have ongoing dialogue with Paul Barnard and others, but if there's something that we could be doing, we, the council, could be doing better in terms of improving those relationships, or if there's something that the council aren't doing that you're experiencing in other areas, I think it's important that you raise that. We're not going to be able to say that we can make that happen, but it's, you know, if we're operating in a silo and there's a better way of doing something, we'd like to hear that, because you're an important stakeholder, and we have very ambitious plans, and we need you to be very much on the same page as us, or that early engagement and dialogue to say, look, we can't deal with this. We need that 18-month break, because when we pull a trigger on something, it has to proceed. Same with your own development plans. But thank you very much for your attendance today. We'll allow you to leave, and then we'll talk about you when you've gone. Thank you so much. Members, thank you so much. Next agenda item, recommendations. In respect of South West Water, there was a lot of information that came across there, quite a wide-ranging debate. Hannah, of course, will have captured everything verbatim. Josh, you did mention, Councillor McCarthy, you did mention that you were very much interested in the signage alert system. Again, any recommendation that we make needs to go to Cabinet for them to either adopt or consider in reverse order. Did you want to make a recommendation? And I say that because I'm very keen that clearly I'm not entirely satisfied that the dialogue between the two organisations is as regular as I would like. We heard about conversations with Paul Barnard and what have you, not a criticism of Paul Barnard or anyone else for that matter, but I wasn't entirely convinced that there's sufficient dialogue going on regularly. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that as well. But you certainly raised something that might be worthy of a recommendation.
No, I 100% take on board what you're saying, and I think extended dialogue, but from their own mouths that came forward, didn't it? They appreciate that this is a big picture issue, so it isn't just a one solution fixes everything. I think the piece, and I would like to put forward to Cabinet this recommendation that we look to have some sort of digital display system, a warning system for bathers in our 3 swimming zones. So the way it works at the moment, South West Water and other water boards around the country collect data from sensors, and they tell you when they're discharging the sewage, when they're not discharging the sewage, or when the sensor is offline. Unfortunately, in the UK, a lot of the time those sensors are offline, and there's technical issues and faults with them. But equally, members of the public should know which of those 3 states, that the CSO is in, because if it is discharging, you do not want to go in the water because of the risk to human health. If the sensor is not working, you need to really consider if you go in the water. And if it's fine and it's not discharging, great.
Chair, sorry, I do want to say that I do agree that's an important recommendation. As such, it was actually one that was made at our Water Quality Select Committee back in February 2024. It's on our tracking decisions, and we haven't received an update on that since the 6th of June 2024, despite multiple chases. So I think that has to be part of that recommendation as well.
Okay, so very strongly, thanks, Lauren. So yeah, I think we will work on the wording of that post. All members in agreement with Councillor McCarthy's recommendation and to follow up robustly. Okay, great. Councillor Nay.
So speaking with the gentleman that came, they did say that that would be paid for by the people that own the beaches and the docks, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they did say that ordinarily it's the beach owner that pay for it, but equally the local authority can ask the question in the first instance. I mean, if we're not to try and embark upon something because somebody else has to fund it, well, we should be rattling the can. There may be government funding available that the local authority can draw down to bridge any gap. So I don't think we shouldn't ask just because the landowner may not do something about it. I don't know.
I'm just being devil's advocate really, and thinking that if the money comes out of PCC, and you go down there in winter and there's 4 or 5 people swimming there, and then beach areas, is it actually value for money to have the digital system when they can look online at the Environment Agency and they can access the information online? I'm just being on that wavelength really. It's cost implication.
You raise a very good point, and we wouldn't want money for PCC being diverted to something else. I'll bring it in a moment. But I think there may be pots that might actually be ring-fenced just for this thing. I don't know, but the relevant cabinet member should be invited to make those inquiries, but we wouldn't want that taken away from another pot that's already been identified. You're absolutely right. I'm conscious of time, Councillor, so did you want to come in on that again?
Just on that point, so there's an existing MOU between the Council, the National Marine Park and South West Water, and part of that is about engagement with the community. So, you know, I see that it should fall into that category, and whether one of those three partners or an external funding body funds it, it seems like something that is fundable and would add a lot of value to the community.
Yeah, and I guess the challenge is the engagement has to be meaningful. So sticking up a sign every fortnight is not meaningful engagement. So you're absolutely right to raise that, but I think we should at least ask the question. And as Councillor McClay says, this has been going on, chasing updates, and it hasn't happened. So I'm happy to support that. We'll just work on the wording. The only other thing that I was going to suggest is that we want, and again, this will be working on the wording. We want assurance that there is more regular dialogue. I didn't feel very confident about, you know, we heard about dialogue, but they were. I heard a lot of, well, we don't know where that's going. I appreciate that was a dig at the government to say 1.5 million, where's it going? But they know about our plans, they know about the JLP, they should be able to say, yes, there are pinch points, or we've got capacity, and I don't think they were entirely clear on that. So I would want reassurance that there's there is ongoing dialogue in respect of our ambitious plans, as opposed to them having a copy of them. Yeah. Yeah, would you be happy to support something like that? Great. Councillor Rickett.
Yes, supporting what you're saying, Chair. I think we've got to be quite specific on it. So we really want a published sort of engagement plan. It doesn't have to be lengthy. What exactly is the dialogue? Because if it's just meet and Paul every quarter, then we need a bit more than that. Yeah, I mean, they're a bit of a mythical organisation as councillors. We're not really engaged. Hopefully we can improve that.
Yeah, I mean, look, within our scope, we can ask the local authority, because that's what we do. We hold the local authority to account. So we can ask the council what's going on. We can ask the cabinet what's going on. That's the extent of our powers. We can't compel South West Water to do something. But I think we must start at the door of the cabinet and the door of the chief executive of the council to say, what's going on? That's our job as scrutineers, to scrutinise what the local authority are doing. It's not our job to scrutinise what South West Water are doing. So that would be my view on it. But you're right, we need to be very specific on the ask, and I'll work on the wording with that. And if it's ambiguous, I'll send it round. One last point.
And one last point, Chair. I think we're in a time now where they've talked themselves of deploying hundreds of sensors into our waters to see the impacts of sewage. I feel that's something to reaffirm why that dialogue is so very, very important for our communities, because those sensors are going to tell us a lot about the impacts and the effects of this sewage. And as we know, even these reductions they're talking about, it still means hundreds and hundreds of hours of sewage pouring into our waters. So the dialogue must be there.
Councillor Sproston.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got another recommendation to add, if that's okay. When I gave my question about air quality, community impact, and in relation to the sewage treatment plants, it was stated that they would go and investigate and look at that further. I'd quite like to ask for a recommendation that some of these results and findings are actually shared with the council, so that we can understand the preventive measures and the actions that they're taking, so we can actually relate this to some of the community.
We'd like a timeline, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, can I piggyback on the back of Councillor Sproston's request and request that data from Plimpton as well in relation to the Plimpton Pong?
I think I think we should do it for all parts, because I mentioned the Plimpton Pong, but there's who as well. So I think citywide, yeah. And what are they doing about it? And what's the plan? What's the timeline?
In my in relation to that, I actually said all of the sewage treatment plants, but I gave an example of Camel's Head as just one. So yeah, that would apply to all if that's okay.
Thank you. Any more for any more? Great. Thank you. I do hope you found that session beneficial. Work programme, anything to discuss? Or at the end of the year, end of the admissible year. That would be the next chair's problem. Okay. And tracking decisions, apart from what Lauren has added, we need to chase that up.
So through you, Chair, I think this new recommendation I've put at the end of the wording in following up on a similar recommendation made during Water Quality Select Committee. So we'll chase those up at the same time.
just so I understand it, because I don't want this being kicked into the long grass, I may not be the chair. They might have found somebody who's capable of chairing a meeting next year. How do I keep an eye on the progress of that?
So the recommendations made today will likely get yourself at the May cabinet meeting to present them. If you wanted to keep track of these recommendations, the tracking is published with every meeting, so you would be able to keep track of that.
Unless, of course, one of the other members of this committee become chair, well then I would quite happily yield. But I think it's important to have that continuity. If somebody's on it, But that doesn't stop any member wishing to add. No? Okay, thank you. Super. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for that session. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Before we go, are we done? We off? Thank you. Just to reassure members, because I keep a track of questions and what's going on and who's asking